Hi, I'm GANEL-LYN, and I am so thrilled to be with such amazing people here today on the Essential Emotions Training Group page. I'm so grateful for the invitation from my dear friend Jenny Swim to share a message today with the nurturers of the world, which I know this group has assembled some of the greatest nurturers and leaders on the planet. So I feel very humbled and grateful to have this few minutes with you today all over the world. If you'll share in the comments where you're watching from, that makes it a little more personal. I've been thinking a lot about this message today, and I love how whatever I teach, when I speak or write, I get to learn. So it's divine and providential that today this is the message, because this is what I've been practicing and being challenged on, the message of self-care and learning some boundaries around how much we output versus our input. So I hope today that I can share some practical ideas that will help give you permission. What do I mean by that? Well, first and foremost, I think when you are a value-driven person, so you value hard work, and you value serving your family, and you value putting good out into the world, it's easy to have those values dictate everything that you are doing. And I don't know about you, but usually I am aware that I've crossed over a boundary when I have an experience that is kind of a crisis. It's a wake up. I like to learn without a big brick wall. I'd rather have a brick thrown at me than a big brick wall. But oftentimes in life, we become very aware as nurturers that we've let go of self-care when things start to become a disaster with our health, maybe with our families. For example, this week, I'm going to be pretty honest with you. It's the first week of school where I live here in Utah. And it's been a transition. I thought we had prepped. I thought we were ready. But my daughter reflected back to me yesterday that I've been really tense this week, which I've owned with her. As the mom, I'm managing all these details that for her aren't as a parent, right? She's worried about her first week of school and homework and getting up on time and taking care of her room. But as parents, we are looking at all these needs and stewardships and transition times. Separate from that is I have a professional life of working and speaking, and so those details were obviously showing up too much in my brain, and I was showing up pretty tense. And I try to take responsibility for that. That is on me to kind of figure out where I'm overreacting. Today I decided I was going to wear a cute shirt that would look great on film. And I decided to be super authentic. I'm wearing my loungewear. I'm wearing the clothes that remind me of rest and slowing down. And so if you're like me and this week has been an intense week, or maybe you have had a season where there's been a ton of output, I like to teach the principle of glass balls and rubber balls. What do I mean by that? This week, the glass balls were starting school, getting up on time, getting to bed, hopefully somewhat on time, homework, lunches packed, that kind of stuff. So the glass balls for me this week haven't been professional things. If you're juggling glass balls and one drops, it breaks. But if you're juggling rubber balls, if one drops, it bounces. So this week, the rubber balls in my life have been more professionally oriented. But sometimes we put ourselves in the rubber ball category way too long. We assume we can push through like a robot, and we can output, serve everyone, and we'll just keep bouncing until one day our health becomes the glass ball, or our marriage, or maybe our kids, or maybe our business. So what I have come to know in the last 10, 12 years of really practicing that, and I say practice, is that balance is not like a still moment of arrival. It's a constant adjustment. So next week, the glass balls may be different, but it's my responsibility to kind of catch those things. I called this message the Saying No Means Saying Yes, and I hope that title is interesting enough that maybe some of you may feel like watching this. What do I mean by that? Whatever we say no to, we are also saying yes to something else. But sometimes no is really uncomfortable. We want to say yes to business opportunities. We want to say yes to our kids and family. We want to say yes to everything. But every time we say yes, we're also saying no to something. So what I've come to see is that the glass balls and rubber balls scenario in my mind is great, but sometimes I have to start to see that something's about to break before I adjust a boundary. My example of that is I got invited this week to a movie premiere, and it was going to get a lot of press coverage. And if I posted that I was there, then that allows me to be seen and reach more people to influence and all of that. But I had set the intention that this week, the priority was, for me personally, was some more rest, because I knew it was back to school. So I was saying no to professional things, but this invitation came last minute. And I have to admit, on Wednesday, I was toying with the idea. I was like, oh, I could still honor my commitment of resting this week if I go, because the day's done and I can still focus on my daughter, get her settled, and run off to this movie premiere. And in my gut, I could feel that my values were in conflict. And so I'm here to report that I chose not to go, because I knew that if I had said yes to that, it was going to pull me out of the commitment of yes I had already made for this week. And the same challenge came this morning. See what I'm saying? When you get invited to share a message on something, you get to practice it more intensely. So this week has been a few of these moments for me where my values felt in conflict. Example, this morning, I knew there was a place I needed to be, because my value is to show up for people. And it was a last minute thing that if I had shown up for it, I could have probably swung all the schedules of my Saturday. But I feel like my body is needing more rest. And so this morning, when there was that moment, I could tell my body wanted and needed and was screaming for sleep. Maybe you parents out there understand that after a busy week and our whole family's adjusting to this back to school schedule. And I was in conflict because I wanted to show up to honor this person, and yet my body was needing rest and sleep. And I chose to stay home. So my next tool or suggestion for you, if you're trying to learn to navigate this, because there's not right or wrong formulas. There's not like your neighbor says yes to these things and no to these things, and that's right for you. Or people on this page are posting where they're saying yes to certain parts of their business or their personal life, and you're thinking, well, maybe I should be doing that too. There's no one formula, because every family is different, every person is different, every need criteria is different. And so my next suggestion is to create a network of support where you're accountable to a friend about what your intention is for self-care that day. If you know that you're someone that gets pulled into another to-do list, like I did this week, all week long, I was like, okay, today's an intention of more rest. I'm going to meditate more. I'm going to have time just reading a book for fun. I'm not going to add to my to-do list and run more errands and get more work done. But every time I would do that, my mind would start creating lists. And so I just started a list of for next week. I'm thinking about that because I'm going to honor this. Well, I also knew that if I was accountable to two different friends about my intention this week and reported back to them at the end of the night about how the day went, did I rest more? Did I say no to more things so I could say yes to rest and rejuvenation and self-care, that I'd be more likely to keep that commitment? So I did that. And I was able to text back and say, yes, today was a more restful day. So that leads me to a tool that Brene Brown uses, which I love Brene Brown. I love her work on shame. I love her honesty and authenticity about where her blind spots are still that she's working on. And a story she shares is going to meet with Oprah for the first time. And it's her life dream that she can tell she's not showing up authentically. At the same time, her daughter calls and asks for a permission slip. And Brene says, I signed that before I left. It's on the counter. She realized she needed to sign a permission slip for herself to show up more authentically, because this was a life dream. She was going to get to be with Oprah. Who else is more exciting to sit down with, right? And so she wrote a permission slip to herself that she was going to show up silly and happy and fun, excited about a dream of hers coming true, instead of showing up all contained and professional and not authentic. So she has said that she wears pants with pockets because she carries permission slips with her wherever she goes. And I love that idea. So I hope this video, this message today, is a huge permission slip for you. That you will write a permission slip to yourself if what you're needing today or this week or this month is more permission to do self-care, permission to say no to things so you can say yes to nurturing. I think so often that if we are busy, productive, value-driven, focused, purposeful people, we feel like that's the zone we always need to be functioning in. But in my value list, rest and self-care is also one of my values, because I know I don't show up at my best. I've been tense this week. If I was trying to do a whole bunch of work on top of this week, I think my daughter would have given me feedback of, you're yelling, you're crying more, you're a disaster. Instead, she just said, you seem pretty tense. And I thought, you know what, that's probably pretty good for a week of school starting and adjustment in our family, and we've had a house guest here, that if I came across more tense, that's probably better than what I would have shown up as if I had said yes to other things. And so I'm here today to give you permission that your self-care, your nurturing is just as much important value as what you're producing, contributing, and influencing in the world. Whatever you're doing with your families, your business, and yourself is of value, and you are accountable for that. And so oftentimes as adults, we go into victim because we're like, if the kids and the dog and the husband and the job and the whatever would just let me be, then I could take care of myself. And I'm here to say to you, you're driving that ship. One example I want to share with you in closing is this. If you are a spiritual person, and if you read the Bible and you think of spiritual gurus in your life, and maybe you're not a Christian orientation on your spiritual journey, and that's fine, but I hope this example is helpful to you. So often we think of the spiritual people in the world, these gurus and these prophets, that they have this all figured out. They know the right balance to strike, and they are purpose driven, and God's leading them, and they're changing the world. There's a story in the Old Testament that I just absolutely love. I do a lot of suicide awareness and prevention. I lost my 40-year-old sister a few years ago. She took her life. And I often get asked about, you know, do these people of religious examples to us struggle with what we struggle with? Somehow we think the prophets, the monks, the great teachers of the world don't struggle with some of these battles. And so this story, I hope, ends with a permission for you, that the great prophets of the Old Testament had to learn this lesson. In 1 Kings 19, this is the prophet Elijah. He's done this great, amazing miracle for the people in his country, and it doesn't create the result that he hopes. And maybe you can understand that. You work really hard at something within your family or within your business, it doesn't produce what you thought it was going to, and you've given your all. You're exhausted because you've shown up 110% for whatever this is, and it doesn't show up in results the way you hoped. This is where we catch Elijah. He's discouraged, he's tired, to the point that he is suicidal. He wants to die. And maybe you can relate to that, where you're like, God, nothing is working in my life. You know, my family's falling apart, my health is falling apart, my business isn't moving forward, and I'm done. I validate that, because sometimes we all get to that place where we're so tired and discouraged that we want it to all end. And this is what we hear from Elijah. He says to God, but he came down and sat under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. And if you're writing this down, it's in 1 Kings 19, verse 4. It's the King James Version that I'm reading from. And as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, an angel touched him and said unto him, arise and eat. And then he looked, and beheld, there was a cake baken on the coals and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. And he arose and did drink, and he went in the strength of that meat 40 days. I love this story. Here we have Elijah, this great prophet, who's performed great miracles of service. He's nurtured others, and it doesn't have the result. He's discouraged, he's tired. And what does God say to him? I want you to rest, and I want you to eat. I want you to rest, and I want you to eat. He tells him to do this multiple times because God knows the 40-day journey that's still coming. And so I hope that story, even if you don't read the Bible and you don't subscribe to those stories, I think it's such a great example that our spiritual leaders and teachers also need to rest, and that you have permission to do that. That the journeys ahead will require balance. So please be mindful of the glass balls and the rubber balls, and don't always make you the rubber ball, because you aren't built to just bounce all the time. And be aware that it's okay. You have permission to say no, so you can say yes to something else. And I hope this message today is nurturing for the nurturers, because I love that we value that. I love associating with people that want to do good in the world and care for others. But we also need to be on that list. I've come to know that even in my own journey with some significant chronic illness and other issues that I've had as great teachers. I love the tools that are talked about on this group. I love essential oils. I love getting aromatouch therapy appointments in my schedule. And I love getting massages, and I love having days and weeks of rest where I am accountable to friends about that. One thing that's powerful is when a group of people like you are assembled and you start sharing your tools of how you self-nurture, it automatically starts giving permission, because so much in our society is about production, and we celebrate that. The book that's published, the big speaking event, the goal in our business, the new house, all of that is output stuff. And we celebrate that publicly on social media, in the news. But sometimes we don't celebrate the self-care, the saying no, and the boundaries that we need to keep. And so I hope on this video you'll share it and share your tools of self-care that you do, and that will give permission to each other to say no so we can say yes. Thank you for joining me. I'd love to still connect with you. I have a YouTube channel, and I've linked to my Facebook page. I would love to continue this conversation and connect with you on Instagram or any of those other outlets. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have learned this with you this week, to be accountable to this group of people for my own self-care and nurturing. And be well. Thank you for having me.